Welcome to the Powercast with Charlie Johnson. I'm one of the world's leading fitness and transformation coaches. I'm going to be providing you with the tools to build your ultimate body and mind. So, absolute pleasure today to have Eric Seifert, the mastermind of muscle activation, M.A.T, muscle activation therapy, is how you pronounce it, I believe.
Muscle activation techniques.
Therapy.
It's okay. Everybody says the same thing.
Do you get that a lot, I'm going to guess?
Yeah, almost everybody inserts therapy in there because it seems
logical.
It seems like such a therapeutic process, right?
Yeah, 100%. So I firstly came across you, Eric, and M.A.T, actually listening to Ben Pakulski's podcast, and I was literally fascinated with the progress you've made, obviously, with some of your clients and people who've used M.A.T. So I obviously then reached out to you to ask you a few questions. And then you obviously subsequently referred me on to Ryan Phillips in the UK, who's made a huge amount of difference to me personally, which we'll go through in further depth. But how did you initially come up with M.A.T, and what exactly is it in essence?
Well, so I'm one of the practitioners of M.A.T. I'm also an instructor in the program, but I was introduced somebody when the developer, who's Greg Roscoff, decided to teach it. I was exposed to it really early. One of the guys that was in the very first group of people invited to learn it was from Toronto, and it's based out of Denver in the US. And I really had like an experience right away with, something therapeutic wise that I'd never experienced before, which was I played football in university, American football in university, and when you play football, you're used to a lot of therapy. You're used to a lot of heavy training, a lot of time in the gym, a lot of time in the training rooms. And so I kind of experienced, I had my own experience of what therapy was for. I also had an understanding in my mind of if you play hard, you have some battle scars, and some of the things after you stop playing, that's just normal pain and restriction. And
it's almost a bit of a sorry state of affairs that people expect to feel injured and beaten up after they've finished their playing career, or after having gone to the gym for a few years. They expect that things should hurt, which isn't really the right attitude to have, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it's kind of, the funny thing is the descriptor is, where you're thinking it's normal versus common. I find that a very common, an easily misunderstood term is that if you hang around with a bunch of football players or you hang around with a bunch of bodybuilders, they all hurt a certain way.
Yeah.
So they all say,
that becomes the norm then, doesn't it?
This then becomes the normal. But if you say, wait a minute, not everybody feels that way. It's just really common to find bodybuilders hurt this way or in these areas. It's really common to see football players with, some level of problems, but they don't all hurt the same way. So, if you never really break the spell, it seems like, that's a normal experience. And this was interesting for me when I first got off a table from M.A.T, from an M.A.T session. And I thought, I don't have some of those things that are always there. I don't feel some of the things that are normal and common and never change are all of a sudden different. And so that was quite a huge experience. And I know you've had your own experience with M.A.T. Here you are, an experienced exerciser, and you know what you're doing, and you've invested in doing the work, and somehow, your foot mechanics don't ever change. And you go see someone, and all of a sudden there's an opportunity for you to say, wait, there's an opportunity that I never thought was possible.
It's and just talk about that a little bit, to be fair. So obviously I messaged you directly. Obviously I've got severely flat feet, so in my opinion, got foolishly thrown into orthotics and basically told in the English term, proverbially, to sod off and just deal with it, which wasn't probably the best advice 15 years further down the line. And it's given me a lot of knee and hip problems, loads of other issues. And obviously after messaging you, I was like, let's give this a try and see what it's about. And after having the first session, I stepped off the bed and I literally was just got my jaw almost hit the floor. I'd never it sounds bizarre, but even just walking around just felt like a whole new experience. Within about 4 weeks or so, I literally have binned off the orthotics and never really looked back, to be honest with you. Massive difference.
Yeah, and so imagine the the difference of, oh, this never changes. It hasn't changed for 15 years. I have orthotics because my feet are bad, and no matter what we do, my feet just get worse, or or they tell you just stop lifting weights. You're just lifting too much weight. You're creating your own problems. So now you have a choice. So I keep going down this path of exercise that's supposed to be healthy for me, but all they do is just give me thicker orthotics, and and then all of a sudden somebody says, wait, maybe that's not the story. Maybe that's not the story that you have to maybe that's not the whole story, and there's another option. And so I think that opportunity to give people an experience, or to ask questions of their body and say, wow, nobody's even looking at, can these muscles contract properly? I think that was the
thing. Nothing was contracting. Like, my feet had almost become dormant, where like did a test,
right.
What it was called, on my big toe, where like literally I had no strength in my like toes at all, like nothing. They literally were not firing. And after the first session, they were up and running again within reason, and it was literally, my mind was blown, to be honest with you, completely shocked.
Yeah, and imagine, so a lot of times when I'm describing, because I teach, sometimes I'm in a position to have to convey a lot of this information in different ways. And if you look at the exercise world, and I've said this on, to some other people in other scenarios, but almost every exercise is really like a recipe. If I said, oh, you believe Joe Weider principles, or you listen to M.A.T principles, or N1 principles, or any one of these things, and they tell you this is an exercise for pecs, and this is an exercise for biceps, and this exercise for whatever, and you do those exercises, and you do them enough, and the work seems to spill into those areas. Well, they're great recipes, assuming you have all the ingredients. And so imagine piling up the mileage on an omelet recipe. You're just doing it over and over and over again, and nobody's ever checked if you have eggs or not. So here we are telling you to get deep into a squat, and you don't have dorsiflexion at your ankle because of some toe function. Your body's trying to say, wow, we just don't go deep. He's fine. Oh, he keeps putting weight on his back and killing himself to get way down there. I'm going to have to figure out how to help him with that. And
overcompensate.
Now compensation is a something helping you versus, oh, you're cheating. Oh, you're doing it wrong.
It's and it's an amazing thing when, like, you just have to almost like believe and think outside of the box, where you get casted out by so much of the mainstream, I don't know, suppose you call it medical community or fitness rehab community, where like they just go from a textbook, and everyone has some very like two-dimensional thinking. I don't know if that's something you've come across.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of times when I am describing it to other people, because we do get chiropractors that become M.A.T practitioners, we get physiotherapists or physical therapists, we get all number of different types of therapy people, as well as personal trainers and strength coaches and things like that. So almost everybody has been given almost a rule book or a paradigm or a lens to look through, and very often it's what's the saying? If you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So sometimes, so sometimes when you have a very specific tool, you start asking questions to, almost with that perspective of that tool use. And so, hey, this is tight, we need to stretch it. Hey, this is too loose. I don't know what that really means, but we need to strengthen this. And, your posture is too loose on one side and too strong on the other. You've done too many back exercises, not enough chest exercises. Your hamstring is too weak compared to the size of your quads. So you need to somehow change the ratio of that. Like, there are so many ways that we keep trying to apply some very simple rule book to this is what your answer is. This is what your answer is. And for the most part, I spend all my time dealing with kind of three different archetypes of people, which generally don't comply to the standard of care. If I work with very, very injured people, they don't usually, comply with normal. And if I work with high level athletes, they for sure very often don't comply with normal. Their demand of performance is, they push themselves harder than everyone else. They perform at a level harder than everyone else. And then there's people in the middle that, look like they're fine, but somehow there's something different about them. So if you do a normal medical process with them, a normal training process with them, they don't somehow adapt the way they're supposed to. They don't seem to recover the way they're supposed to, or they don't evolve or, grow muscle the way they should. And you say, well, we're doing 14 different, arm exercises. How come you don't get biceps? And that's where you would just say, well, I'll just throw more volume on it, or I'll just hit it harder, or I'll just over pour everything on top of that.
I think
does that make sense?
They think working harder is necessarily the solution, or it's not working harder. It's working smarter and finding out why whatever you're doing now isn't working or isn't productive. Because there's always why something is as efficient.
Yeah, like 100%. So if you didn't have the ingredients, we could keep trying to, make a steak, but nobody gave you a steak. So you got everything else but steak. It doesn't. How many people do you know in the bodybuilding community that do, chase very elusive calves? Have you ever seen some people with amazing calves, and you say, what do you do for them? They say nothing.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, what? I walk a lot, you're like, what? And then you ask some people that don't have calves, and you think, dude, find a leg day, all you're doing is training arms. And you watch them, they do like 1,000 calf raises in a workout, and they still have no calves. And you're thinking, well, they're doing all the exercises. Do they have the ingredients to even respond to the stress? Like, where's that work going?
Would you say, like, obviously I spent a lot of time with Ben Pakulski and Jordan Schaller last week, and they talk a lot about stability, obviously, like the hip, at the scapula, depending on obviously what muscle you're trying to train. Would you agree that like the M.A.T therapy can make a big difference in obviously improving those stability points? So then obviously increase the tension you can put on muscles, and then obviously help them grow further from there?
Yeah, I think one of the bigger areas that if they're talking about spine and scapular motion and spine and hip motion and stability, those are massive opportunities for you to pick up development and be able to actually, either move a lot of weight or control something very well for a lot more time, like whatever you're going to try and do to create stimulus. If you don't have if you have poor scapular motions, you're asking for all kinds of trouble when you start piling up all kinds of shoulder related motions that are, whether it's pec or, delts or arms or, or back, those are all going through shoulder. I mean, you hear bodybuilders go through splits and they say, I do arms on one day, I do shoulders on another day, I do back another day, I do pec on the other day. And I said, well, you train shoulders 4 days in a row. Like, no. I was like, yeah, you did. You trained shoulders 4 days in a row.
Whenever you're using your upper body, there's some involvement of the shoulders, isn't there?
Yeah, your shoulders have to be involved somewhere. Obviously we're talking about where's the moving limb. Is the elbow moving? We're going to feel more elbow flexors or extensors, but the shoulder extensors and flexors have to be involved too. So, if you have shoulder stability issues, it's going to impact some level of development or some level of overuse that you're trying to obviously avoid, like, wow, he was a great bench presser until he wasn't, and he tore a pec. Yeah.
And then it's game over from there.
100%. And then you see lots of people that say you just got to deadlift more, and they have really poor hip mobility.
Yeah.
They have lack of internal rotation at 90 degrees or something like that. And their body, we should get deeper, and, we should be squatting or deadlifting off platforms so that we can get even deeper. And I'm like, or your butt should be on the ground and touching your ankles. And I say, well, wait a minute. What if they have no ability to flex their knee? What if they have no ability to flex? Yeah, they have no range, but somehow their body is smashed into that position, because that's where results will finally happen if you finally just go deep enough.
It's an interesting analogy. That with is there any particular movements you find work in terms of like an overall body movement that will help with a lot of these issues that maybe are perhaps more functional? Is there anything in particular you could recommend? So, for example, myself, I've identified another issue I have is very poor thoracic spine mobility.
Sure.
So, like, my upper body doesn't move particularly well rotationally or just generally. Is there anything you found that's worked particularly well with athletes or strength training individuals?
Well, I would say that a lot of people don't focus very much on breathing, of all things.
Yeah, probably as well.
We have some motion misunderstanding when we get into trunk and spine, training, or if people throw the activation word around. Most people really don't understand very well how to breathe. And if you say that to it's funny, you say that to most people, are like, what? No, I'm doing it right now. It's like, I'm breathing, see? But if we started talking about athletic movements and and trunk and spine control. And everybody now, because of such a, I don't know if CrossFit is as big over in the UK, but
sadly,
well, I mean, good or bad, they got to be doing, they got to be doing something right.
Busy.
Yeah, they keep me busy. I mean, they've got to be doing something right if that many people are motivated to do some stuff.
Yeah, I like the team ethos of it.
I think there's many things that if you add a little bit of common sense in there could be some very big positives. It's when it gets a little crazy that it's like, why are we watching this on YouTube? We should not be cheering. But they have such a huge dominance of athletes that are now doing overhead movements.
Yeah.
And so obviously now all this overhead sort of focus, whether it's walking on your hands or you're going to do more Olympic lifting or, nobody's really asking whether you should or not. They're just saying this is the new, or ball tosses up walls and stuff. And nobody's asking whether you actually have the range for that. Like they haven't said, lift your arms all the way up. Can you get to 180 degrees? Okay, I guess now we at least have the opportunity to do some, walking on your arms or some shoulder push-ups or whatever. If you don't have it's more like if you don't have that thoracic spine able to move, which is part of that motion, then your shoulders are the ones paying the price for that. So I would definitely say that.
Definitely.
Yeah, I would say some breathing things are kind of a hidden way to look at, do you even understand how the rib cage is supposed to hinge? Do you catch yourself holding your breath in a bunch of movements? Do you use, angling your breathing and your rib cage to complete movements? That's going to turn into sort of bad habits down the road when people say, oh, I have to be a low back squatter because I don't have any thoracic extension. I'm like, well, that was a problem that wasn't solved a long time ago. And now you have a much harder way to fix it.
Yeah, I think that's probably the point on that personally myself, to be fair. I've trained for a long time, but I've now discovered the importance of all these factors in terms of how important it is actually your body moves correctly and functionally. So A, you can protect your joints and soft tissue, and then B, you can actually maximally put as much tension through a muscle as possible to get the most development from it, which is obviously the main goal probably most people will be listening to on this podcast. So in terms of breathing, have you got any tips to help with that you recommend?
Yeah, so if you thought of the movement of how the rib cage moves, if you picture the top 6 ribs, like where your sternum typically, like sort of top end of your sternum, it moves in a direction that is sort of away from you and towards you. Like if you pictured you're almost like a big giant could lift your rib cage up. Yeah. Most people, when they lift the rib cage up, that's the top 6. That's called a pump handle. If you describe the motion, like an old fashioned Western movie, with a water pump.
Yeah.
If you just pulled that out, most people go, and they would breathe in. But the bottom 6 ribs have 2 attachments and move what's called a bucket handle. So they like a paint bucket or a little kid's sand bucket kind of thing. And so those actually fold in towards the body, in towards the middle. So they move from the outside in, where the top 6 move from the front, like more anterior to posterior. And so those 2 motions, if somebody doesn't breathe real well from the bottom, they actually just keep trying to breathe more from the top. And so you start seeing this major dominance of almost like a chest up kind of posture. Yeah, they end up getting this very high chest breathing, and then you see a big chunk of posture that changes. So they don't end up having they could say core strength, or they could say they have core activation, or all these kinds of things. But they start becoming almost, it's kind of funny to say, 2-dimensional, because they're moving forward and backwards so much for almost all their breathing movements and all their effort movements, that they stop having, like, their body stops becoming a column. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, you pretty much probably just summed me up to a T, because Ben Pakulski pulled me up on that on Friday. So that's probably fairly close to myself as well, with my poor thoracic mobility. Probably is all encompassed there with that one.
And so if I had to pick on you, just even over the phone, and I'm not, looking at you or assessing you, but if he was picking on that, and I said, hey, the only way that thoracic spine gets you more and more air, it just keeps getting more rigid and more rigid and more rigid. And so that upper thoracic becomes so locked into giving you more air. I would say, like, nose breathing, funny enough, in high effort stuff is a funny thing to have to command.
Like when you're like heavy training, close your mouth and make sure you're just breathing.
Yeah. Close your mouth and force yourself to breathe. And then obviously you might have to adjust some of the loads and the whatever, or you might have to build in a different recovery model because, basically when you want more air, there's a whole bunch of stress response things. There's sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system things that happen when you say, I'm going to open my mouth and I'm just going to get more air in. Yeah. But if you can, that obviously starts tipping back your posture so profoundly, and you've tied that into every time you get high effort exercise, I get stiffer thoracic. And so there might be some stuff to mitigate that. If I said, hey, you're going to practice, breathing, like if you just put your hands sort of laterally across your ribs. And if I said, I want you to breathe out as hard as you can and feel like you actually purposely have to effortlessly breathe out, because most people don't, it's more like relax and breathe out. But if I said to you, breathe out and feel how your ribs get closer to one another, more from the outside in. And if I said, now take a big breath in and try and move those ribs, they literally lift upwards and outwards. And sometimes if I'm talking to a client, I might say, breathing with your gills, like if we're a fish.
Breathing with your gills is a very good analogy to think like that, to be fair. And I suppose the deep breathing through your nasal cavities, that's opening up the lower ribs more, taking it away more from the thoracics.
Yeah, it forces you to start to use your diaphragm better. That's and amazing. Then you start to, and so that could be something that you have to change a bit of the effort and have to pay attention to technique a little bit, obviously on some heavier loaded stuff. But even that simple thing, if you said, wow, I get to this load, and my breathing has to shift. And now I can get more reps, but my technique has changed. Maybe I don't want to do more reps or put more load on the bar without losing this trunk and spine stuff.
Yeah. That's amazing. I tell you what, one of the other big things that's made a massive difference to me in the last 4 to 6 months, similar on this sort of line of things, is using nasal strips when sleeping, because I'm naturally a poor breather through my nasal cavity anyway, and that in itself has made me feel like life-changing. So
some people also are doing it's like a piece of scotch tape over your mouth.
I tried that, but it just freaked me out, to be honest with you. I thought I was getting
it is a bit of a stressful thing.
The nasal strips is all right. The mouth tape, that's not cool. That doesn't really go down too well.
Yeah, it might be a question of time. It might be, hey, you have so much time in exercise that is this type of breathing, that is mouth breathing, that you might, because you're a high effort guy, it might be like, hey, I gotta learn to kind of organize that a little bit. And then it might be, oh, that's way too advanced for me at this point. But after nasal strips and I work on my thoracic spine and I see that kind of coming around, you might go, hey, maybe I'm up for the challenge. And it might just be, it was too big a challenge at this point.
Yeah, you jumped too much in the deep end of the pool in one go.
Yeah, totally.
And I think there's a lot of the analogy. I think a lot of people in the fitness community or strength training or whatever it is, they have a lot of that. Like they skip the beginner stage of everything and will try and go to the most advanced mobility drill possible and do a really shoddy job of it. And then suddenly realize, okay, I need to go back to the basics here.
Yeah. For some reason, basics sounds like, like special bus, Basic sounds like, oh, that's for the slow kids. And
I'm way too jacked to advanced for that. I don't need that.
I'm going straight to advanced. And, and the bodybuilding community, as much as I love it, does have a challenge of constantly trying to find a way to get farther, faster, bigger, stronger, and what secret of the pros can I find? And so they'll, take huge leaps into things that it just might like, wow, that was way too far. They could have made a seamless, entry into some of these things, but they take such a jump forward into more advanced things that it becomes quite a stumbling point, or, becomes an injury, or becomes, wow, that didn't work for me. I'm like, well, yeah, but you jumped, a 10,000 step from 1 to 0,
from step A to step Z straight away.
Yeah. And it's like, from W to X, it wouldn't have been so bad, but you went from A, and it's like, you jumped too big a step.
Yeah, it's quite a common one. So obviously that's a great way to work on it, obviously improving the upper body. Have you got anything, obviously the big problematic area, which I think obviously people probably think is a lot of it is back problems, but it's more to do with the hip. Have you got anything?
I think dorsiflexion limits in the ankles is probably something that people really would never pay attention to. Because, in terms of show muscles, if somebody said I had a big anterior tib, wow, look at that. I think a lot of people are not really going to spend a lot of time on that in terms of just not seeing the relevance or not seeing how it ties in to better hip motion. And, people are seeing massive quads, but they don't see great, hamstrings. And I'm like, wow, hamstring development might be linked a lot more to ankle motions and how well you control all that stuff. And then that in itself turns into better pelvis development. And that pelvis development turns into better hip stability / trunk and spine help. And then you start seeing that kind of build out from there. So I think that dorsiflexion limits and things like that aren't a cure-all, but it's an area that nobody really looks,
Yeah, again, it goes looking for those areas of solutions to problems where most people aren't thinking. So obviously you mentioned in terms of ankle dorsiflexion, again, something that I sound like a cripple here, but something again I suffer with. Obviously I've had a few M.A.T treatments, made a big difference. But is there anything you think anyone at home could do that would help with them with this? Like personally, I found like even just loosening off the tissue underneath the bottom of your feet using like a lacrosse ball or like an AccuMobility ball works really well, just to almost take a bit of the tension out. But you find that's worked well with people?
Well, so there's lots of different things because everybody is a little different and everybody has to be their own best assessor. They have to kind of judge what works for me versus, oh, I'll do what Ben says or do what Eric says and it'll work. It's really more, can we get people to pay attention? Some people will respond very well to, soft tissue stretching or soft tissue self massage things. But they don't follow it up with any, it's almost like, oh, I'll get it loose. Now we're good. And so what I would say is that something that is mobile isn't necessarily stable. And that's
very good.
A very scary, it's a very scary thing for people to even think like, oh, I'm moving well. That's gotta be good.
Yeah. Then throw a load of weight on it and see what happens.
Yeah. And it's like a lot of, if I said, hey, get a deep tissue massage, feel really mobile. Now get on a squat rack and max load. And most people are like, whoa, I'm not sure I don't know if that would be okay. And I said, well, wait a minute. I thought more mobile equals better. And some people might say, yeah, I'm not sure I'm ready to get under full load, So I would say that they intuitively understand that doesn't necessarily always jive, but we're constantly fed this thing that says, the medical model is, I'm sure in the UK is the same as Canada is in the US. The medical model is 4 steps. We take care of pain first, we take care of inflammation second, right? And then we take care of mobility, and then we try and deal with strength. That's the 4-step process. Yeah. And so you can see that most therapy people will pretty much be crowing once they get through that mobility part. They're like, see, wow, look how that's moving.
You're ready to rock and roll now.
And now they send you over to strength and hand you a ditto sheet or tell you to do your homework or, and they kind of leave you at that point almost like, okay, we're done. And I would say that most people, when they're doing their own self-care, they think they're done at mobility too. Like they think once they've established something moving, they're like, okay, we're good. And if they haven't done it, they've done it with lacrosse ball, they've done it with acupuncture, they've done it with heating or self-massage or foam rolling, they might not be they might not be strong. They might not, like I said, the strength part is stability. They might not be stable. And so I would probably say that if you're trying to acquire range, like, hey, I want to get my feet to relax, then I have to start thinking about what am I going to do to start to even isometrics or things that I want to do to get them to start to contract so that I know that I've prepared them for exercise. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%, 100%. And it's one of those things I think you have to remember, like there's normally a reason why the body's tightening up on something. And it's a response, from my opinion, to like protect you. So if your glutes and your hamstrings have gone very tight for a reason, it's probably because your body has noticed there's a massive amount of instability somewhere, probably at your hips. So it's doing it to stop you from hurting yourself, essentially.
100%. So I think that's sort of the one paradigm that most people want to get rid of is like they have tightness. And
it's almost like taking the handbrake off a car before it's getting in. You take the handbrake off and then it hits the wall because you didn't have the...
Yeah, you didn't have the handbrake.
You keep in place.
Yeah. So I think that the idea that the body has the ability to control stuff And if it doesn't, it tries to find a solution. And some of the solutions we just don't like. And so some of those things like, we're fed this in, whether it's pharmaceutical, I don't know if you guys get the same kind of commercials we do, but if somebody says, you have pain, just take this drug, so you can go out and enjoy a game of golf, or you can go out and have your run because you deserve your run. And I'm like, wait a minute, if you have pain and tightness, the body's saying we probably shouldn't run right now. And if you get rid of that, then where's that inability? The body, now I went out and ran a race, or I went out and played golf anyway. And now, well, I'm sore anyway, I'll just take my drugs, and now I can just keep going and having my fun. I think the body's idea, as you said perfectly. Yeah. If you said, well, this is, again, we get back to normal and common. Every bodybuilder hurts. Okay, then it's just normal and nobody questions. Is this normal? Like, this isn't normal. I don't think this is optimal for me to be sore, but because we're all sore, we believe this, kind of false prophet of, oh, this is my badge, or this is my proof that I did something correct.
I'm broken.
Yeah. How sore are you? Oh man, I'm crushed. Oh dude, I'm so sore. Yeah. And we all clap hands and, let's get after it today. And so
repeat the process.
And repeat the process like some weird subculture. And so I think that if you could say, hey, I've got to prepare the body, I could probably look at, light isometrics, and prepare the body, after I've loosened something. Hey, I could do some active stretching. Most people have some concept of passive stretching. Most of us have very little concept of active stretching. And if you added some active stretching into most of your routines, you'd be shocked how better your joints would feel. And you could target more and more range, or at least this is how much range I have because I can actively stretch and tell you how much I can hip flex. I can tell you how much I can dorsiflex. Well, now that's how deep I would squat.
And again, it's where anyone who's training, they're looking to build mostly likely muscle tissue. And again, it's the same thing that Ben Pakulski and everyone goes on about, is just staying within the active range where you can actually contract the muscle fiber you're trying to target. If you can't load your quad at the very bottom of the squat, then you probably shouldn't be there. If that's what you're trying to target, then it doesn't make sense.
I get a lot of bodybuilders that ask me and say, oh, you like partials? And I said, well, wait a minute. If this is the full range you can contract, then that's your full range. But people, because it looks like the machine moves farther,
they think they should.
They should move as far as the machine moves. Or, it's kind of a weird imposed thing that says, oh, you're doing short range. Well, that's where I feel my pec the whole time, or that's where I feel my hamstring the whole time. If I move farther and now I feel my calf, I can, move more weight, or I can move this full range, but I don't feel my hamstring the whole time, then I'm probably not, I've moved past whatever I can contract. That's a pretty simple, sort of rule of thumb that I usually apply.
100%. Would you say, going on that line as well, I think everyone presumes that everyone's body is exactly the same, so they can do every single exercise and do the same range, as we've already said. But in reality, everyone's got completely different biomechanics in the way they're built, the way they're set up. Male, like heights, weights, and I think that's something that people probably need to be more aware of, as they don't think about, okay, how am I going to fit into this movement? How does this fit in for my body in terms of executing this correctly to get the most out of it, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and certainly in North America, we have almost this attachment to, everybody can just go out and practice, and everybody can do everything, and if you just put in the practice, everybody could look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like if you had a female client, look at a picture on a bodybuilding magazine and say, she just started. She never worked out before in her life, and stare at the picture and say, oh, I don't want to look like that. And they're staring at a picture of like a world-class bodybuilder, top 10 in the world, male or female. And you're like, yes. Because if you just it's just a question of decision and you're going to look like that. Like, I think we have this fascination.
It doesn't just happen. It's like the thing we laugh is I get people sign up, not to discredit people, when people sign up for programs, like, I want to get big, but I'm not going to get too big. It's like, trust me, you won't get like, it's not that easy.
Yeah. Like we have a long ways to go before we start deciding what too big is, like it's not going to happen tomorrow,
Right.
Oh, I bought the car the wrong size. Oh, damn it. I think so when we start thinking about how everybody does exercise, we apply the same, even educated public is applying the same thing. Oh, this is how deep Ben squats. He has great legs. That's what a squat looks like. And, we've never even seen Ben in person, or we just see Ben in a pose, or we see Ben in a picture, and we should approximate what he does because obviously he's successful. So I'll do what he does. And it's almost that same idea that it's just as simple as doing what everyone else does. And if you force yourself into the body positions they do, you'll see the results they get.
I think it's like a sheep mentality. I think it's a problem. Same thing with social media doesn't help. Like with a few people in the UK who will start doing a certain exercise, and then you see half the world suddenly wants to start trying to do like a stiff leg deadlift or whatever it might be, because they think, oh, this is the secret to building whatever. Yeah. When in reality,
this is the secrets of the pros. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like in reality, it's probably not going to work for 99% of people.
Yeah. I've had friends of mine that, I could this personalities, and I help with an awful lot of people to do some social media stuff. And every once in a while they post something that is really fantastic, but I have challenged them privately because I don't want to make them say, I've said, look, you can't post something. I think it's almost inconceivable that people post something with no idea how long it took them to get there. Like they post something that looks like at the end of the journey, at the destination, this is what I looked like, but they never showed you the full, it's almost like, they just show you, wow, look at that guy. He's bench pressing 600 pounds, but they don't show him at the start, or he doesn't present, I saw one of my clients did like a Turkish get up with a bar with, like 135 pounds.
Jesus.
And I was so impressed. And I sent him a message, said, look, you can't, like, how long did that take you to get to that spot? This is not a kettlebell. This is a full 135 pound bar, and I watched him do it, and he posted on Instagram, and I was like, wow, that's so impressive.
Send me the link of this now. I'm intrigued.
And I have to say, how potentially dangerous is this to post, because people are going to load up a 135 pound bar and think, if he can do it, I should try. And I think that's sort of one of the negative potentials of, sort of crazy stuff that get posted on Instagram is nobody's interested in things that are just normal, or that are, hey, here's day 75 and here I'm working away on this. And, almost everybody wants to jump to the end again and say, oh, okay, this is what bootylicious workouts look like, or this is what, this is how I'm going to get glutes like nobody's ever seen, or this is how, I'm going to do these crazy things.
Sensationalist sort of attitude.
100%.
In some respects. Yeah. Go mad.
Yeah.
Not the reality. That's one thing that I always like to convey, is like the rawness of what I do on a daily basis. So you said of obviously how you get from A to B, is just trying almost like to document that journey so people can see what I do on a daily basis, and how you live your life, and then like the accumulation of that over a period of time to see you get on the journey to where you want to be, which obviously I've documented some of the bits in terms of like improving my ankle mobility and bits and pieces. And I need to get back on that bandwagon in a big fashion. But again, that's something else I want to increase the amount of awareness that I'm doing to help a lot more people, because I think there's so many other people who suffer with these sort of problems, but just get fobbed off by the mainstream medical community, or just aren't educated or aware, and to be any the wiser, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think there's a huge, everybody, what's going to get eyeballs in today's world is fantastic stuff. And I have no argument that, wow, it drew my eyeballs. The question is, how potentially dangerous, or how is that going to lead the unsuspecting public of, this is possible, I should do that, or I should do everything they did, because somehow that will have me looking like this world-class athlete, that I just decided to follow today. And now I'm just going to try that thing that they're doing. And it's some weird, if I just put it in the practice and I'm like, wow, you have no idea how many steps they took. It could be 10,000 steps, and you're deciding to go, A to triple Z in 1 second, and wonder how you got hurt. So, obviously that's again where I see sort of the missing link in a lot of that, is that you can still get eyeballs. Just start giving some people some fair, sort of look of, yeah, this is me working on stuff. This is me, presenting my
weaknesses.
I love when I see stuff on Instagram. Yeah, like weaknesses, or when somebody shows a fail. When somebody shows a fail, I think that's brilliant. I think that is like, wow, that's real, because the person's saying, look, I missed a lift, and it's not some like fail army, like, oh my God, the guy almost died. It's like they lift and you see them actually not, finish a lift. I think, oh, there you go.
It shows the realness of the person, that they're happy to put that out there, not just the glorified success reel.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the challenge, is everybody's Facebook, Instagram is showing some weird version of alternate reality of, I'm only going to show you the best pictures. I'm only going to show you and I think that's sort of the fitness community's challenge, is there's sort of do you remember in old bodybuilding magazines that you're not that old, but there would sort of be a start picture and there'd be an end picture. And you sort of kind of go, okay, from there, he got to there. So I kind of think it should look like this, but if there was something weird in the middle, you never would have seen that part, it was, and obviously nowadays with everything is video and vlogs and stuff, that you're going to have access to seeing a lot more things moving, and maybe people don't look at pictures anymore. But
digital moving content now, I think.
Yeah, there's so much moving content, but it's just like that sense of, is there even that's a start and that's an end, and you're going to figure out the rest, and hopefully it works out for you, So I think that's sort of an interesting thing to see people like yourself trying to put content out that is giving them access to the journey, or saying, here's some in-between steps.
Yeah. Even today, for example, I put something out on my story today of me doing like a body weight single leg like lunge, because my strength on one leg is terrible, to be honest with you. Again, I want to document all these bits and pieces that I'm trying to correct, and the reason why I'm trying to correct them, and also like put myself out there and show, look, like I'm by no means perfect. I've got tons of like hidden flaws all over the place in my training that I'm trying to like dig deeper into, find people like yourself to help me try and fix, and then improve forward, and then set that as an example and a case study that other people can use. Like, oh, Charlie had this problem with his flat feet. He did this, he fixed it. Because for me, like, I haven't found anyone else really who has documented anything like that to a great deal. And I think it's something that's valuable information that will just give more people an insight into what can be done. If you do have a problem, you can get it fixed.
Yeah, I think my entire business is geared around people that don't fit in the normal, that are looking for ways to fix their own problems, are looking, or they don't, they're doing all the normal therapy and it still doesn't work. And so now they're going to turn to, other authorities or other people on the internet or whatever to say, does anyone else have this problem? I've done everything that they say is supposed to work. And, there's a much larger population out there that doesn't fit standard of care, whether it's, that's why they do all the exercises and they don't get the same development. They do all the exercises and they get overuse. They think they're doing it well, and you say, well, there's some other things to learn, or, there's some other parts of the path that they never thought to, they just thought start and finish. And so I think, people like yourself that are going to lead the way to kind of bridging that gap and say, look, not everybody that looks great is perfect. Not everybody that, you've got a lot of development, you put a lot of time in. You're a good looking guy, you're athletic, obviously. And yet, if we look at one lens, he looks perfect. And if you start saying, no, actually, we're all real people. I'm working on these things. And yeah, we all have little pieces of problems. Then I think that gives a lot of people, more, I don't know, hope is the wrong word, but, more context that allows them to start saying, reality. Hey,
they don't think it's a perfect situation.
Yeah. Not everybody looks.
Also give them an idea that I think a lot of people love an excuse that, oh, I've got a knee problem or a back problem. It's like, we've all got a problem. Like, I've got the internal rotation in my left shoulder at the top really badly, really poor weak lower traps, very flat footed, and barely any unilateral leg strength. Like, the list goes on, like no thoracic spine mobility. Like, it's endless when you start picking like people apart, but people look at only like almost things on the surface level and think everyone's perfect and think, oh, like that guy hasn't got any issues. My knee hurts, I can't achieve X, Y, Z. And like, ultimately, if someone wants to get in shape or change their physique or their life, they can do it, but they have to have the mindset that they want to go and be open-minded and find someone to help them achieve whatever their goal is, whether it's getting in shape or getting muscles firing again and not having any pain.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it's very, very, very well. I can't improve upon that really, other than just, that sense of, Yeah, either, oh, he's perfect, I'm going to try and do what he does. I have knee pain, so I can't be perfect. Therefore, I shouldn't bother trying.
Yeah, I'll just give up.
And yeah, I'll just give up because I don't, I can't build not all the parts are in the Lego box. I can't build it then. Okay, I'll quit. And so I think that the idea that real people are looking great and, exercising hard and pushing themselves and still, struggling with stuff, but not in a bad way, but are actually trying to say, can we inspire people to be problem solvers and say, okay, obviously there's something different about me, not in a bad way, but I have to figure that out. I have to learn. Yeah, I have to learn to control that. I have to learn to participate versus, it's easy bake oven and I just put it in the oven and it comes out a cake.
It comes out perfect.
Yeah, it comes out perfect. I don't have to do anything. It's like, well, I would argue that most people, there are some amazing athletes or people out there that just go in the gym and I swear they get bigger by just inhaling, and then other people, they would look at you and maybe not think that you've worked hard, or that you have to work hard.
That's where the interesting thing I think comes a lot with, not bad about anyone at all, but like, say, people will look at someone just because he's got an incredible physique and think he's an amazing trainer and knows what he's talking about. Whereas often the people who have the best physiques know often the least because they can do whatever they want and it will work. Whereas some other people who sometimes might not have quite as good high level physique, they've had to go around a lot of issues, a lot more complicated problems to try and get to the same sort of end result, which I always think is an interesting sort of concept.
Well, yeah, if you have like somebody walks in and they barely study, they barely show up to class and they get an A, and you get someone else that's a D student, they show up for class and you teach them all these good basic things and they work themselves up to an A. Well, they're both getting an A, but one, kind of walked in and just does it and the other had to kind of earn it. And so, you might look at the two of them and think, oh, there's nothing different about these two guys. And like, well, wait a minute. One had to learn all the way along and had to earn it all the way along. And the other, might blow something up because they just never even thought about how well they train. They just do it and it seems to work for them until something tears off, until they get hurt, and then they have no study habits, so to speak. They have no way of getting back because they never really earned it. They just showed up and, started off kind of great.
No, 100% agree. Now, to sort of finish this off, is there any particular tips you could say for anyone as a bit of a general term, but for people to try and look for finding movements that fit in with their physique, or any sort of points that the things they should try and watch out for?
Well, so some of the things that, because I have to do an awful lot of counseling sometimes and coaching to athletes that, I can only observe through a video or, so sometimes when I'm working with, especially if the person's more athletic, but it's very funny if I said, filter your exercises, based on one things that make you feel good. And that's hard because a lot of people just get trashed in the exercise community, but there's exercises, if you use the bias of, what makes you feel athletic?
Yeah. When you do like it moves well in.
Yeah. Like when you do something and you feel athletic, that would be one way to filter some things out. If you don't, one way, if we're talking about mind muscle connection, you don't necessarily need to know your anatomy, but if you feel an exercise very well and you seem to have an affinity for it, it's probably in an exercise that feels great and it fits your mechanics and you have access to those tissues. I'm saying great. But if you are doing something that feels like, man, that I don't feel athletic doing this, I don't feel, I feel vulnerable. It's kind of a funny thing to say, but I don't feel connected to this exercise, or you feel frustrated with an exercise, I would drop it out of your rotation, at least for a day or so, or a week or so, and see, is it just something that I'm going through, or it's something that I can't figure out? And then that would be where a place I would probably hire a coach and have someone taking a look at you, or, send me a video or something like that, where I'm like, oh yeah, you're moving too far. Or I would take down loads, I would take down ranges, I would make you hold things very still and almost get you experience, where do you feel the exercises? Because I definitely agree with Ben, and a bunch of people are saying, mind muscle connection. If you can't feel it, the bodybuilding community does have a little bit of an advantage. If you can't feel it where you're supposed to feel it, this is an exercise for biceps and you feel arms, it's kind of like, well, yes, your biceps are in your arms, but the exercise should feel like biceps, predominantly biceps. If you feel this is a pec exercise and you feel shoulders or triceps, I would say, yeah, whatever range or whatever exercise you're doing or whatever load you're doing is not going where you think it's supposed to be going. So I would say that fitting exercises to how you become aware, I would say that's probably a big thing. And again, the more athletic someone is, if they're doing compound movements, kettlebell, swings, something, wood chops, whatever, Olympic lifts, if they don't feel athletic doing it, there's something wrong.
No, I agree. That makes total sense. And the other thing I'd probably add to that I found personally is that sometimes you need to drop the weight a little bit to sometimes actually feel the movement a little bit more correctly where you want to feel it, rather than just biasing and moving the weight from A to B sort of thought process. Think about actually contracting the muscle you're trying to train.
Sure. So if I take a client through that or an athlete through that, and I say, here's an exercise, and we experience what bicep curls feels like, and they're like, wow, I really feel my biceps. And I increase the load, I increase the time, I increase the something, I make them move slower, whatever it is. And I say, is that more bicep? Yes, that's even more bicep, because we've increased the stimulus and the challenge. And then I increase the load again, and it becomes less bicep. Then, and at some point I increase the load again, and it's even less bicep. Like biceps are in there, but it seems like everything else is helping now. At some point, if I kept up with them, well, more is better. At some point, I'm making it more acceptable for their technique to fray further and further from what I wanted. Yeah. And so the quality is starting to drop to come up with that kind of quantity. So very often that explanation of trying to be careful about quantitative measures being the driver of the bus, and you have to understand what is a qualitative measure, like how well you do it, where do you feel it, do you feel in control of that, do you feel stable and athletic in that position and with those movements, and you just keep upping the numbers somewhere. Oh, do it more, do it longer, do it heavier, do it farther, and somehow you lose that experience, then that all of that is too heavy, too far, too long, whatever it is. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100% agree. 100% agree. And I think that's where people need to leave their ego at the door sometimes with the way they're training, and train with their brain, not their balls.
Yeah.
Good finishing point.
Yeah, totally.
So we'll wrap up there then, Eric. Thank you so much for this. Like, been some huge amounts of knowledge in there that I've picked up from that. I'm sure everyone will find very, very helpful. Particularly the nasal breathing.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. It was a great chance to sit and chat again and connect and have some ideas passed around.
Yeah, and I'll keep you up to date with my progress with my own M.A.T. And how can anyone find out and reach out to you, Eric?
I have a website, Core Muscle Activation. .com is my website, my company website. If you're here in Toronto or North America, you can access me through there, contact, that kind of stuff. I'm on Instagram as core_muscle_activation. I do get an awful lot of people that reach out to me there. And yeah, I don't give out my phone number or email anymore. I used to. I don't do that anymore.
Yeah, probably got less to do that one. Yeah. So absolute pleasure to speak with you, Eric, and I'll pop all your contact details in the show notes here for anyone who wants to get in touch.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for the opportunity. That was really great.
No, absolute pleasure. Thanks, Ed.